Yes, I know. It's so good. Hey, there we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started in about 2 minutes. Grab some sugar and some caffeine in the back. 2-minute warning. Thank you all for being here. 2 minutes. Thank you. Check. All right. We are so grateful that each and every one of you are here. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. How's everybody doing? I know we are going to be doing a little bit of a whirlwind and know that folks came from all corners of the North Coast and the North State to be able to be with us today. And we also know that folks are driving back tonight, try to beat the storm. So we are going to try to keep this as efficient as possible here today. My name is Mike McGuire, and I am really honored to be able to work with each and every one of you in the State Senate, and I want to say thank you for the amazing opportunity. Today is our kickoff meeting. This is a kickoff meeting where leaders from throughout the North Coast are coming together to talk about Care Court for the North Coast. And you are going to see local leaders, leaders from across the state, and of course, representatives from all 7 counties between the Oregon border and the Golden Gate Bridge to discuss one of the boldest mental health, addiction, and homeless housing initiatives launched in the state of California in almost a half century. So we have been phasing in Care Court. The first 8 counties were phased in 2023. All counties in California, the second cohort, will be phased in by December 1st of this year. So what we want to be able to do is give you as much information as possible and take a regional approach to implementation of Care Court. So how did we get here, and what the heck will Care Court do? So last year, the legislature and the governor changed the definition of gravely disabled. And we updated California's antiquated 50-year-old conservatorship law so that those who need help the most, living on our community streets, those who candidly cannot care for themselves due to substance abuse or mental health disorders, can get the help that they desperately need. In order to qualify for Care Court and associated services, an individual must either be unlikely to survive without supervision or a threat to themselves. Family, friends, first responders, behavioral health professionals can submit a petition to their local court for a clinical evaluation. If that individual then qualifies, an advocate will walk them through the process every step of the way. Now, during that process, that individual who's taken off the streets would be connected to essential services and housing and health care. Over 12 months, participants must attend hearings to make sure that they're following the care plan that would be assigned by behavioral health professionals and, of course, the court. So a lot of folks are asking, is Care Court going to work for everyone? Just like policies for Los Angeles doesn't work for us on the North Coast, am I right? There is not a one-size-fits-all approach. But we believe that this long-term, holistic program is going to be able to better serve those who are challenged with mental illness, as well as the need for addiction services. And let's just be really candid. We owe it to our communities to help solve this homelessness crisis that exists on our community's streets. And being from a rural and a suburban area here in the North State, we need to be able to work together on a regional approach to be able to implement what we hope is going to be this life-changing initiative. Today is just the facts. No matter if you are from the left politically or the right politically, we've all seen the raw pain living on the street. And it's often a result of severe mental illness and substance use disorder. And I hope that we can all agree that our mental health care system is in need of significant investment and overhaul, and that the homelessness crisis is unacceptable and it is appalling. And what we know is that we must do better. So that is why we are all here today, to discuss exactly how we're going to roll out Care Court in Del Norte, Humboldt, Lake, Marin, Mendocino, Sonoma, and Trinity counties. I want to quickly get to a question that we have had a lot, and that is, how the hell are we going to pay for this? So our experts are going to do the deep dive. I'm going to do a quick 30,000-foot view of funding. So here's what we know. Over 48 months, the state has invested and will invest about $12 billion, all going to cities and counties for homeless housing. And as we know, those units have to be wrapped with addiction and mental health services. There's $11 billion either in state or federal funds that are advanced every year for behavioral health care from the state and the federal government. There will be some reallocation of that. In addition, there is going to be a bond on this March's ballot. It's worth about $6.4 billion. Here's some highlights of what that would do. It would fund 11,000 acute behavioral health care beds, 26,000 outpatient treatment slots, and about $1 billion set aside for veterans housing. And that's about, that would create additional 2,300 units for vets who may be on the street. We believe that's about a total of about 30% of California's total homeless population. I'm going to end it right here and turn it over to our amazing panelists. And again, I can't say this enough. We are so grateful that each and every one of you are here today. We have assembled an all-star group of panelists from the California Department of Health and Human Services to RCRC, to the state courts, to leaders from counties who already participated in the first cohort last year. Together, we're going to walk through the what, the who, the when, and how Care Court works and make sure that each of you leave here today with an understanding and a roadmap about how we can implement. I want to be very clear. This is going to be the first of 2 meetings that we'd like to be able to host in the North State and the North Coast, to be able to continue to work through and how we can develop a regional approach to the implementation of Care Court. Because if we're not working together, I'm going to be super honest, we're not going to make it. So we have to be able to come together, which we're doing here today, to talk about a regional approach to implementation. So without further ado, I'd like to be able to introduce our first panel. We will have two panels. Each of you have agendas on your table. You also have background material on care court funding, et cetera. So we are going to be doing a deep dive into the Care Court initiative from statewide leaders. We're really grateful that we have Stephanie Welch here. Stephanie Welch is an amazing leader. She's the Deputy Secretary of Behavioral Health with the California Health and Human Services Agency. She really is overseeing Care Court, and she also doesn't sleep. So we're really grateful that she is here today and to be able to share her expertise on the implementation statewide. In addition, we have Charlene Deppner here today. She is the Director and Center for Families and Children in the Courts from the Judicial Council of California. She's going to be doing the deep dive when it comes to the judiciary and our Superior Court system. And we're really grateful that we have Ivan Bardwaj here today. He is with the Policy Division of Medi-Cal Behavioral Health with the Department of Healthcare Services. He is going to do that deep dive, the nuts and bolts of how the funding is going to work, what implementation looks like. We're going to get into the weeds on that, and we're ready to go. The most important part of today is hearing from each and every one of you. So besides the Deputy Secretary, who will have 5 to 7 minutes, both the director and Mr. Bardwaj will have about 3 to 5 minutes to be able to present. The reason being is we want to have a robust conversation from each and every one of you. So we'll hear from the 3 panelists. We'll then open it up for questions, comments, and concerns. We are tracking your questions, comments, and concerns so that we can come back to you either directly through email to you individually or as a group. And again, this will be the first of 2 implementation meetings of kicking off Care Court here on the North Coast. Is there any questions that we have thus far? Thank you all for being here. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the Deputy Secretary. She's going to give us a 5 to 7 minute overview of Care Court. And Madam Deputy Secretary, I'm not trying to be pushy, but I'll give you a heads up when we're about 60 seconds away from the timeline, and then we'll go to the Madam Director. Take it away, Madam Deputy Secretary. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, Senator, for your leadership. I'd have to say this is the first convening of a cohort of counties that I've been to that's not cohort 1 counties. So I appreciate your leadership in bringing folks together. And I also want to express my gratitude for all of you for coming here today. And thank you for giving me a good opportunity to get out of Sacramento. I spent 10 years working for counties or an association that represented counties, and I do and am truly committed to trying to figure out how to make this work for the diversity that are the 58 counties of our state. So it's a great opportunity. And with that, I want to just say that this is the beginning of what I hope to have as many conversations. We were talking earlier, being able to convene our cohort 1 counties almost on a bi-monthly basis in person in Sacramento and dive into the details of solving problems has been an incredibly important learning experience from us. This administration deeply cares about behavioral health issues and deeply cares about care being successful, but also recognizes it's a brand new program. And when we do brand new programs, we have to be open to making some tweaks. We have to be open to looking under the hood and making sure that things work. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to use the cohort 1 and 2 process. It's also one of the reasons why at our Health and Human Services Agency, we've really been tasked with leading coordination across these 2 important system partners to make sure that we are constantly communicating and we are constantly coordinating with each other. I know that my partners here will go into some more detail about that. You also have a handout that really articulates what our various different roles are, but generally speaking at Health and Human Services, our primary goal is the success of care. And that's why we are investing in supporting our department, the Department of Healthcare Services, and really having robust services to provide tailored technical assistance. So your input on what that technical assistance is from the policy level or the program level will be really important in the coming months as we ramp up to the implementation of phase 2. So I wanted to take a little bit of my time to talk about the why. why Care Court? I am the Deputy Secretary of Behavioral Health. I do feel overwhelmed sometimes, but also incredibly blessed. I've worked in this field for about 25 years, and it has been drinking from a fire hose. But basically, we were very, very thirst-quenched. We have an incredibly underfunded system, and I do want to recognize and sympathize with you that we're asking you to rapidly change and catch up with decades of maybe not investing in behavioral health in the way that we should. And that's important because the catalyst to us sitting down and thinking how we wanted to design care was the IST crisis, the incompetent to stand trial crisis, and the higher concentrations of people with severe behavioral health conditions in our prisons and jails. People shouldn't have to decompensate to the point where they commit a crime, often a crime of just trying to live and get by with voices in their heads or experiencing a lot of trauma, and end up with the revolving door of incarceration being the only option for them to get help. And so at the core of it, CARE is truly trying to go upstream prior to incarceration that leads to finally getting treatment for an untreated mental illness, and or really one of the things that we're seeing and emerging from our Cohort 1 counties, an alternative to conservatorship or an ability to step down from conservatorship. I do want to point out that another major component of CARE, and I think we were kind of criticized a little bit in the beginning, is that it is very focused on a particular population. It is very focused on people who have very severe behavioral health conditions, and in particular, people who are living with psychosis or schizophrenia. That's not a large population of people in our state, but it is a group of people who need a lot of resources and support, who, with the right kinds of stabilizing medications, access to housing with supports, and that housing may be a residential placement for more in-depth treatment, can move on and have full and recovered lives. And we also felt that that was a responsible place to start, frankly. These are people who need help the most, and frankly, we wanted to make sure that we were focusing efforts and energy on them. So that being said, on a statewide basis, we estimate that there's anywhere between 7,000 and 12,000 individuals who are eligible for care. I think there's been some commentary in the press, like maybe it's not moving fast enough, or are we getting all the right people in? And I think we really feel like we're at the right pace with a new program, learning new things, rolling out extensive technical assistance to both our court partners as well as our county partners in behavioral health and social services, that we're at the right pace in terms of getting people into care. It is very new in the process. I can say that to date, we just started in October, so it's been about 4 months. We have over 220 referrals for people into care, and only 26 of those have been determined by a judge to not really meet the initial criteria. And I mention that today because that is an indicator of how hard we've worked with our counties to make sure that people are filing petitions on the right kinds of people to get the right kinds of care. And one of the reasons why that's important is that we don't want you all to spend your precious resources and energy looking at things that may not be appropriate for care. And a lot of the discussion that we're having, and maybe you'll hear it from your county panel after this, is the incredible opportunity that this has brought upon for counties to really focus on a population that needs help. A lot of these people are accepting voluntary services and wanting to accept housing in particular, and not needing to go through the whole care process. And so that's a huge win, and we see that as really reorienting the focus of publicly funded community behavioral health on people who have the highest needs. And if that's the outcome that we have, we're incredibly happy about that. So before I pass it on to my colleagues here, I do want to, offer an invitation. I'm here. I know I'm just one person. There are other people. But as my Cohort 1 counties know, like the first time I ever met everybody, I put my cell phone on a whiteboard behind me. I think it's going to be a little scary to do that with Cohort 2. There's many of you. But in all seriousness, we deeply want this to work, and we need to be responsive to your concerns if you don't feel like it's working. And I hope that that's reflected in some of the comments that you have from our county partners this afternoon. We try to listen, we try to problem solve, and I appreciate being here today.
Thank you so much. Madam Deputy Secretary, before we turn over to the director, if you can do 2 minutes, what will it look like over the next, let's just say, 10 months for counties in regards to implementation?
Yeah, I would say it's going to start with what I think what you're doing here today, getting together and learning from each other and having open, honest conversations about how you want to approach this. The system collaboration that we've seen, we've been going out and visiting all of the Cohort 1 counties. We spent a day or two with them. They're kind enough to let us do that. And the system collaboration, the public defender that's calling the county council every day to walk through this, or the behavioral health clinician who's in the field and doing outreach work. It is that core system collaboration. And frankly, as I alluded to, there's so many things in the behavioral health space. You mentioned SB 43, that other thing that's happening in March. There is a need, a deep need for system collaboration to effectively serve this population, and you have more resources coming to do it, to serve a broader scope of people, maybe just people with SUD, maybe just people with who are unhoused. Getting together now and building those bonds in preparation for later this year is what's going to, I think, in my opinion, make you successful.
And the last question, Madam Deputy Secretary, is we talked about December 1st in regards to implementation. Back us into that, and what does that month of December look like as far as a launch? What does that look like if beginning to be implemented by December?
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that, but I do think that
from a state perspective, though, what would
from the state perspective, a couple of things that I think we can help with. One, we can be responsive to tailored TA. If you as small rural counties need something different, we should be responsive to that. Second, we have to help you appropriately communicate. I know that you're going to hear from your cohort 1 counties today that they want to share their tools. Hey, if they've come up with a great assessment form or come up with a template for a care plan, use it. Start having those conversations so that you're not reinventing the wheel. And then from a state perspective, obviously we have to pass our budget, and we have to make sure that those dollars are getting into your hands. All of you should have behavioral health bridge housing funding. If you're having challenges figuring out how to use that or locating housing, call us. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure you're getting the support that you need so that you have slots available. I think you could speak more eloquently about what the judicial system needs to do to be ready. I can say, don't expect to have a pile of 50 petitions on your desk on day one. I don't think that's really what we experienced, and we have worked really hard to try to educate the communities, and the counties I know work really hard to educate the communities so that you're getting appropriate petitions and you're not feeling overwhelmed by a lot of petitions to process on that first day in December.
Madam Deputy Secretary, she's going to be hanging with us for the rest of the afternoon to be able to answer your questions. We are so grateful that we have Director Deppner here representing the Judicial Council of California. We're going to do about a 5-minute deep dive into what courts should expect. Madam Director, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here with all of you, and I just want to tell you you're about to, or maybe you already have, joined a really awesome group. And this is a club that is hardworking and innovative and sees a problem and says, how can we fix it? And so we are here for you for sure. We collaborate a lot, just as my colleague said. Her last slide has a list of things that each of us does, so I'm not going to go through it point by point, but I can answer questions about what the Judicial Council will be doing. I would say that if I had to pick one thing that is a key thing to the success we've had to date, it's partnerships. So I'm really reiterating what we've been saying. We go to lots of places where we talk about the CARE Act. The three of us have sat in just this configuration on many occasions, and we work really hard to make sure that we are collaborating and that it's just connections. It's a network that's being built, a network that will be the success of the process. And the other thing that's really important is communication. I will say that the month before we launched Cohort 1, everybody was just eager to get going. They were ready. One of the things that our group does is readiness assessments. So we go out and we talk and we figure out how to solve problems and come up with alternatives. Now, we had 8 cohorts launched this year. So this is many more and more complexity too. But this is not the first rodeo for most of the people who are on my team, and they work really carefully and have great respect for the courts and their collaborators. So I think you should just feel like you can call us, you can look at our resources, and I just had one flyer that is the black and white one here, Save Inc. On the left-hand side are links that have been developed from the resources that we've developed for Cohort 1, and people have generously put up things that they're doing in their own courts as well. So it's a great walkthrough of the trainings that we've done. Have all been recorded, so you can go listen to something. You don't like it, there are many more that you can choose from. Then on the upper right-hand side is a very, very tiny reproduction of the Judicial Resource Network that is within the judicial system. And that is where I would recommend starting, because it starts you with the toolkit that says, okay, you got to do this. Here's some training, here's some material on what people have done to date. And so that's really helpful. And in the bottom corner is a very hard to read picture of what the landing page looks like for self-help online. Our self-help centers have been a godsend, and they're there to help the petitioners who are coming in trying to figure out what this is all about. Is it for me? Help them with their forms, all of that, and so they're ready to go to court. But I've also, for the last year, been doing trainings about working with this population for the self-help centers, and everybody knows these are really good trainings, and so everybody comes and tunes in. It's an online thing at 1 o'clock every other Friday. So this is sort of the feast. We're going to help you figure out how you want to carve it all up. And I just want to say that what came out of Cohort 1 to date was not 8 cookie cutter things. There are things that you have to do to be compliant with the law, and there's plenty of room to focus your work on local realities and what's the culture of your community. So we will help you with that as well. Last thing I want to say is that I'm going to be quiet because I'm here to hear from you. I really hope that people will speak up and ask questions.
Madam Director, I'm going to have you jump into the weeds for a moment. December 1st is here. What do courts, we have presiding judges here today, we have executive officers, we have public defenders, representatives from the DA's office, DAs. What needs to happen between now and December 1st between those 4 different agencies, those 3 different agencies, the courts, public defender, DAs, to be ready on day 1? Can you just give a brief overview, and we'll get into it, but if you can just give a brief overview on that.
Just collaboration. And in Cohort 1, we had opportunities for those people from those entities to meet together. The judges and the county representatives met monthly to just talk about how to put things together and share things. Just a lot of talking. We presented today at the Judicial Council meeting, not me, but my colleagues, and every opportunity we get to just talk about what it is and tell people what's going on, we take advantage of it. So there's plenty of things that you can do. And the last thing that we do together as well is every other Wednesday there's something that we call, what is it? It's a 1 hour anybody from any court or community can call in and just talk about what happened in their court.
And Madam Director, there are some counties on the North Coast that have 2 judges, some that have 4, right? So how, and I know we're going to hear from some rural counties here in just a bit, but bandwidth financially to be able to make this work, what does that look like?
Well, I think that at this point, I don't know a number for the Cohort 1 courts, but it's usually 1 day in a larger court. In a smaller court, it's less than that. And the way it looks depends on which part of the system that the care court landed in, whether it's in probate or collaborative justice or wherever. So that is something that we definitely can help with in terms of planning. Lots of our Cohort 1 started small, and that worked out pretty well because we didn't get a high volume of applicants. we were afraid that people wouldn't know enough about it and we'd get tons of petitions and have to work through them. The education we did in the community really helped. People understood who would qualify for CARE Act.
Got it. Thank you so much. And again, higher level, you're hearing from these two experts. We're going to want you to ask as many technical questions as you need to today, whether it's on the state side in regards to implementation, judicial side, and we call him Mr. Nuts and Bolts, and that is Ivan Bardwaj. He is going to do the deep dive that I think many of you are anticipating in regards to state support, technical assistance, how reporting works, and then all-important reimbursement. So, Mr. Bardwaj, you're bringing it home here today. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. First of all, it's an honor to be here with you, Senator McGuire, and with all of you. This feels like a culmination of a lot of work, over a year of work, working with Cohort 1, and then being here in this first kind of in-person meeting with some Cohort 2 counties. So this is a wonderful meeting to be a part of. So just really, really appreciate it and genuinely honored. Department of Healthcare Services is responsible for kind of 3 main components. It's the training and technical assistance, it's the data collection and reporting, and it's the fiscal side. Now, I am not a fiscal person. Our fiscal team did want to bring forward some information, so I'll be sharing a little bit of that, but really focusing on the training and technical assistance components and the data collection and reporting. So first of all, kind of starting with the training and technical assistance, we have a contractor that's been leading this out since early 2023. That's Health Management Associates, and they're going to be your BFF. I mean, this is an organization that has, for the last year, partnered very closely with Cohort 1 counties to launch a host of webinars, numerous resources and materials that cover, the gamut of CARE Act. CARE Act 101, what is CARE Act, the CARE Plan, the CARE agreements, what the CARE process generally is, and then, a lot of more detailed work like how does housing work with respect to the CARE Act, what about the peer role, what about volunteer supporters, and all of that didn't just happen and then disappear into the ether. These have all been recorded. These are all available on our website. As Charlie had mentioned, it's care-act.org. It's on the flyer there. It's a beautiful webpage, which I think makes it easier to engage with some of those resources. But one of the great innovative things that Stephanie had alluded to was essentially that there's one-on-one coaching available. And this is really innovative. This is not, we're not just putting resources out there and good luck. We recognize that every county, every region is different. Los Angeles could be further, different from Mendocino. But the idea is to understand the unique challenges that not only the regions are encountering, but also the individual counties. Even counties in the same region will have different challenges. And so the idea is to understand what those challenges are and then be responsive to them. So regularly engaging through one-on-one coaching, through making office hours available. So this is really, really comprehensive coaching that's happening and training and technical assistance. There's a lot of funding that's been allocated to this, and we have Health Management Associates on contract for the foreseeable future, essentially for the next few years, so that you can count on them being available for you through and through as you begin to implement, or rather as you begin to plan, and then you begin to implement, and then post-implementation as well.
If you don't mind, so the one-on-one coaching, go into that a little bit. One-on-one coaching for Health and Human Service departments, one-on-one coaching for public defenders, for the courts. Be a little more, if you don't mind, just talking about specifics on that.
Yeah, so a lot of it is really for county behavioral health agencies, but we're working closely with the Judicial Council and making sure that we have resources and coaching available for the courts and judges as well. So it's a comprehensive training and technical assistance that's available.
So what would that look like for a county like Del Norte that has, 23,000, 25,000 folks? What would that look like? Again, limited resources to be able to do this. How would that work for Del Norte or Trinity County, who has less than 15,000? explain what that looks like.
Yeah, I think there's not one way that it can look like, and I think that's an important point, actually, is that you can establish a unique relationship with your coach dependent on your needs. So if you have, a host of, I've got like 50 questions, I need them all answered, can we meet on Wednesday? That's a possibility for you. That you're going to be on a first-name basis with your coach, and they're going to really work with you to understand what those challenges are. So, and there'll be regular office hours, like I mentioned as well. So it's not just that one-on-one coaching, but there'll be periods available where you can just come into a meeting and ask your questions, and then you can kind of jet off and go on into implementing care. So it's really, it's a very, very close relationship, I would say, between the counties. And that's been the experience for Cohort 1 counties. In fact, that was an idea by a Cohort 1 county that we, I think Riverside County had suggested it, and they, we didn't even think about that. And then we thought, you know what? We have the funding to be able to make this happen, so let's do it. And it's grown exponentially since, the scope of our training and technical assistance extensively.
Okay. Yeah, please, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you
Oh,
have,
no.
Do you have a couple more minutes?
Yeah, and then so we also got data collection and reporting. For a lot of folks, I think this is, probably a challenge. We have certain data folks, and we try to sometimes stay away from them, but this is actually one of the core components of care, because we want to be able to tell the story of care, and we recognize that how challenging it is to interface with data. So we've put a wealth of resources out there to be able to make this as easy as possible for all the counties. And DHCS is responsible for 3 reports. It's the early implementation report that's going to be published in December 1st, and it's just going to cover trial court data. And then there's going to be a kind of a larger report, an annual report, and that's going to be published on July 1st, 2025. And that's going to cover kind of the vast array of outcomes, data, and performance measures. And then we've got our our evaluation that's going to be published twice. There's going to be a preliminary evaluation that's going to be published in December 2026, and then a final one that's December 2028. Again, telling the story of all the work that you're doing and kind of the successes that we're seeing, and being able to use that information to be able to pivot and improve incrementally on care. And then lastly, I just want to cover kind of some funding. The senator had actually touched on this a little bit. There is startup funding that's available. That's $57 million total between both cohorts. And Cohort 1 received $26 million, and for Cohort 2, there'll be $31 million. There's actually guidance out available on our website. If you just Google BHIN 22-059,
Holy crap.
There's information there to be able to, we can share more information on that. Your coaches will know all that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. That's, and it's really about planning and implementation. And then there's also guidance coming up on claiming. We'll have information on what the claim form looks like and what the claiming process will look like. And then also forthcoming guidance on the accountability fund and sanctions and how that process will work. And that's going to be released shortly by our colleagues in the local governmental financing division within DHCS. So I think that covers it.
Madam Deputy Secretary, please.
I was just going to add, for the implementation funding, you guys know how long we can be with our guidance. I think the guidance on how you can spend it is less than 1 page, meaning get creative. We weren't directive at all, and you should have received those dollars by the end of last calendar year. So make sure we look for it. The early implementation dollars went out to all counties, not just Cohort 1 counties. So we can also talk about ways in which you might creatively be able to have an opportunity to use those, but you should have those.
All right. It is now the most important part of this panel, hearing from each and every one of you. So we want you to ask the questions. We want to get as many questions as possible, because we're going to then go to our panel from hearing from local leaders about, and they're right over here, hearing how it's been implemented both in a larger county like San Diego and a county like Glenn. And then we also have RCRC here to be able to speak as well. So we have 2 microphones. If you don't mind standing up. If we have a question right over here in the back, if you don't mind giving us your first and last and your title and the county in which you're with.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name's Ray Buenaventura. I'm the Lake County Public Defender. And I got to say, You know, as a public defender, one of the most heartbreaking things I've heard from clients is having them say, well, when they're in the jail, I'd rather stay in the jail because at least I get food and I get housing. And so I'm hopeful that this program will work. The public defenders are really at the front line of the clients that need this kind of service and help. And so my question is, you know, I could see us being the front person, the first stop, and then eventually it's handed off to behavioral health or the providers that give the care. How much involvement will the public defenders have in the care, crafting a treatment plan, or following the progress of my client, or staying with them until the end? Or is it one of those things where the public defender gets involved just in the beginning, or are they more involved in the treatment, and do they have an ongoing relationship? Thank you.
That's a great question. Madam Director, why don't you take this, please?
Public defenders are highly respected by the feedback.
Right here.
Thank you. Oh. Public defenders are highly respected by the courts. And the ideal situation is what happened in some but not all Cohort 1 courts, that they were invited, a local public defender was invited to the planning meetings.
That's great. Thank you, Madam Director. And Madam Deputy Secretary, talk about who refers in and how that process works.
Sure. And real quickly for the public defender, I know you guys are having maybe a meeting that the State Bar Association is hosting next week or in a couple of weeks, so lots of information there. We didn't talk about training and technical assistance for public defenders, but we are talking about it and making sure that you guys are supported. I've seen tremendous work so far in public defenders collaborating with both county council as well as with county behavioral health to do engagement, you know, to serve the client the papers, literally. And so you have a very important role to play, so thank you. So petitioners, the scope of who can petition is one of the unique things about CARE, in really designing CARE from lessons learned from our assisted outpatient treatment. It is a broad group of people. It is everything from a family member, like surprisingly lots of siblings are filing petitions, spouses, but also parents, children, also behavioral health providers of a broad scope. You could be actually a medical provider or physician, somebody who's working in an acute psychiatric hospital, somebody who's working in an emergency department, somebody who is a first responder who is out there doing crisis calls and is working on a homeless outreach team. Also, the county itself, frankly, I think one of the kind of exciting things that one of the counties is doing that we're working with is looking at all the referrals for conservatorship and all the people who are currently on conservatorship, and almost like doing an audit to see who would be appropriate for care as an alternative to conservatorship. And so there really are a lot of different types of petitions. I would say so far in this like kind of first, I would say phase 1 of the first developmental phase of CARE, about half of the petitions are coming from family members. We're not surprised by that developmentally. I think that will, over the course of time, change, where more petitions are going to be coming from healthcare providers and behavioral health providers and first responders and other people who are in the field who see these people on the streets potentially every day.
Thank you so much. All right, appreciate that. We're going to go to our next question. Welcome. We got that microphone right there.
Hi, I'm Kim Turner. I'm the CEO of the Mendocino County Superior Court. Hi, Charlie. The question is actually for you. I've been watching the chat, and it appears that a lot of courts are really including self-help services as is it the entry point? Is this where petitioners would go for assistance to actually draft their petitions? Is that what we're envisioning at this time?
We have a contract with the State Bar. The State Bar administers it and is responsible for making sure every court gets what they need and for training as well. And that's been working very well. And for self-help centers, there is the every other week training. All of them are recorded. You can see that as well.
Right. I guess, though, my question is, it seems that, every court this year got money, even the cohort 2 courts that aren't actually implementing their
planning
their
money.
core, I know it's until next year. So we're trying to, be responsible and creative about how we use the dollars that we received this year, since we're not in a really strict planning phase yet. We're kind of early on in the process. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to ensure that if we're going to use self-help services as kind of a first point of entry, for a lot of the family members, siblings, children, neighbors, whoever might be coming forward with a potential candidate, how will they, first of all, how will they receive the training to be able to support that kind of an activity?
They being the self-help centers?
Yes.
Oh, well, as I said, we have training, and there's a whole bank of training that happened last year. But I don't know if you know Melanie Snyder, who's in charge.
I do, yes.
She will come out to your court and help you out. She's very, very.
I don't mean to interrupt. I think we consider, if you don't mind, Madam Director, instead of referring to the training, let's just go directly. So what happens on the self-help service piece? What will happen? So again, a lot of these are smaller court systems. What can they expect this year in regards to training, making sure that employees are going? I just don't want to keep referring back to the videos. If we can just answer directly.
We're just continuing what we're doing. We're open to questions, and basically, I just want to make sure that you know that the representation is not your responsibility. That's already.
No, clearly, we're not set up for that, but I'm assuming that the support service that we would provide would be to, when candidates are entering the system through some other portal other than a public defender or, through the criminal justice system, for example. So if self-help is going to be involved in those efforts, I just want to make sure that we have all of the tools and training that we need in order to be able to support that.
So one quick point, Tuolumne is a great example. Maybe we can make a connection. We went and visited their self-help center. Their self-help center has an entire binder that families or anyone who wants to petition can check out, that step by step walks them through. They even have a video that they can watch. And so the self-help centers have played an incredible role in training petitioners on how to fill out an accurate petition. They're on call. We actually watched some people in San Diego get in-person support in putting together a petition. And to your last point, I just want to acknowledge we are seeing trends in people wanting to contact their public defenders while they're incarcerated and petition on their own behalf for care. And so we've identified that as a new training need to kind of think through. And I know Orange County's there. Actually, we're going to talk to them about it in 2 weeks, about how that is a new layer that we didn't necessarily expect. And it triggers some different ways to respond, and so we are looking at that. But the self-help centers have been incredibly important, and I know Melanie will come out to you and your center if you need it.
So that was kind of a segue into my next question, which is about a repository of templates, materials, videos, binders, whatever is out there. So if Tuolumne has already put together a really great small court model, it would be wonderful if that was available on the public website or available on JRN or someplace where other courts can take advantage of it.
I'll make sure it gets on there. I just want to say also that online self-help is now a thing, and it's got a segment for CARE Act that's a great thing. We're also going to be resurrecting the sharp courts, so that we'll be organizing with participating counties who want to share the burden of doing the workshops and doing the trainings for each other. So anyone in the circle would be able to listen in on those things as well.
So are you talking about the original 11 sharp courts?
Well, it's the model. I don't know you sign up for it. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Madam CEO, really good questions. We have a question right over here from Del Norte. So we're tracking, Madam CEO, we need to do follow-up on self-help centers, and we need to do a deep dive on that, everything from operations to training of staff. And then whatever has already been developed, especially for smaller courts, let's get that out there, whether it's an online resource and or getting you hard copies, and we will be following up with you, I promise, on this. Yeah, and then we also are going to have a follow-up meeting, but we'll make sure that we're following up, and we are all keeping track on notes. Madam CEO, I promise you on that. Thank you. Good afternoon.
My name is Esperanza. I'm the Court Executive Officer for Del Norte. Did I understand correctly that the bench can decide whether to treat care court under the probate umbrella or the collaborative court umbrella? That will come directly from the bench, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you so much. We're going to head back. Good afternoon.
My name is Elise, and I'm the Director of Behavioral Health in Lake County, and I want to acknowledge that there has been significant investment in behavioral health by this administration. I got to brag a little bit. Lake County was the first county in California that didn't get one of the CCMU grants who had their mobile crisis plan approved. So we are all for the CalAIM changes. We know that our beneficiaries need more services and supports. That's clear. I do see a golden thread weaving in through SB 43, Care Court, and Prop 1, which is framing the homelessness crisis as though it were solely driven by behavioral health. In reality, people are homeless because they cannot afford to live. And so while these are very downstream solutions, and I appreciate that, that's where I live is downstream, I'm concerned, I guess, at the lack of representation of issues that lead to those. Again, the inequality and income crisis. The statistics are not good, and so we can put a Band-Aid over a gaping wound all we want, but it is not going to fix the homelessness crisis. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Please don't take what we said in regards to mental health as well as substance abuse disorder as the only, right? I think that we agree. I don't want to speak for the whole group here today, but the high cost of rents, high cost of homes in this state is driving. And what we also know, the growing numbers of single women and women over the age of 65, it is directly based off of income and the lack of ability to be able to keep up with rising costs, in particular rent. So thank you for that. I think that was an important one. Very grateful. Sir, we're going to come right over to you. Good afternoon.
Thank you. David Sutton. I'm the Marin County Public Defender. I have a question about funding. The Act contemplates under the Welfare and Institution Codes that legal service providers get funding through the State Bar's trust account. I think the reality is public defenders have been doing this work, and I think we're eager to do this work, but we want to do it right. So is there any funding source, an ongoing funding source, not just early funding source for attorneys, full-time attorneys, as well as, say, social workers or caseworkers, et cetera, going forward?
There is an allocation for the bar, but the money is general fund money, and it's already appropriated in the governor's budget for the next year.
So the statute dictates that the money first has to be offered to legal aid services. If there is no legal aid services provider that takes the money is distributed to the public defender.
So a little bit more. They have to do an application and pass that too.
You have to apply and you have to follow certain rules to receive the funds, but the intent is that would flow to the public defender. I think that we recognize, especially in some of the smaller counties and the counties who are in more rural areas, that there are not available legal aid services. One thing that's been really interesting to watch, though, is kind of the collaboration between legal aid services and public defenders. You all naturally collaborate already, and so we're just seeing that natural collaboration. And legal aid services that may not be or didn't apply for the grant are seeing a different role or a supportive role to public defenders in how this is actually being implemented at the local level. So again, I might actually be at that thing in a few weeks. I just was talking to my colleague this morning on my way over, so I look forward to engaging more with the public defenders to have a better understanding of how we, what kind of training and support you might need.
And real quick.
Very brief follow-up. Is that application available on this material? Where is that?
They will call for the applications for the next fiscal year right after the close of this fiscal year.
Thank you so much. Mr. Public Defender, we're going to go to Sarah Duquette real quick on this issue from RCRC, and then we'll give you last word, Mr. Public Defender, please.
Just want to quickly add, we had to get the money out the door really quick during Cohort 1, and it was clear some of the counties weren't going to have legal aid, and that's probably going to be the case for most in this room. Because they were short on time, there was kind of a two-tier process. One was an RFP that went out to legal aid. The other ended up being a direct allocation to Cohort 1 public defenders. I think as we move forward and we figure out what the legal aid situation looks like when they finish their larger RFP, that process of getting money out the door could look different. So please engage, stay in contact with us. They've done some initial budget work that you can take a look at that estimates how many hours per case it will take, as well as a rate for the attorney. To be determined if that's sufficient, but take a look at that. So I think it's kind of to be determined how it all rolls out, but I think there's definite conversations about how it's going to look different in different parts.
Thank you. Let's give the public defender the mic, please. Yeah, please, Mr. Public Defender.
Is there a work plan or work study for legal professionals, so the social workers, the case managers, et cetera, who are actually coming up with a case plan, who are embedded within the public defender's office, as opposed to just strictly attorneys?
Yeah, there's a two-tier system, and DHCS can talk about it as well, but there is a process to get reimbursed for the process-driven costs for behavioral health, and then that JCC component that is public defender legal aid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Public Defender. Thank you, Mr. Kett. Ivan, to Mr. Public Defender's point, Mr. Bardwatch, please. Did you want to add to this?
I can just discuss some of the claiming guidance that's going to come out for staffing costs specific for CARE. So it's going to cover the court report, court hearing, outreach and engagement, and kind of appearance disclosure notifications, data reporting, and then CARE activities will be able to be claimed on a quarterly basis and paid at a statewide rate that's established by DHCS for the providers that are able to provide those activities. So kind of looking at the larger scope of claiming for practitioners.
Thank you so much.
Does that make sense? So it's not an allocation, it's you claim based on a rate to get reimbursed? Because I think that's been a misunderstanding maybe sometimes, and we have some guidance that should be coming out imminently. Actually, we were thinking it might even be today on this particular process. I actually wanted to take a moment just to acknowledge the comment that was made by the Behavioral Health Director in Lake and be clear that you do not have to be unhoused or even housing insecure to qualify for care. So, and I appreciate your comments, and I'm not going to take time today to talk about those necessarily, but I did want to be clear. It's not a requirement. You do not need to be unhoused.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary. We have an entire panel coming up in just a moment from local leaders, really talking about lessons learned from that cohort 1, phase 1. But we wanted to be able to see before we adjourn our first panel. Want to see if there's additional questions, comments, concerns, Madam. Please, Mr. Chair.
Bruno Sabatier from County of Lake. 2 questions. One is, can you explain the clinical review? Who does that? Is that something we need to set up? Is that a third party? What happens if our behavioral health specialists are the ones requesting care court? Do they do the review as well? Is there a conflict of interest? And number 2 is sustainability of funding. Obviously, lots of concerns. We're looking at multiple years of potential deficits for the state. Starting this new program, what is the future sustainability promises that have been put into place? And I guess I have a third question, sorry about that. What happens if we don't have the services or the capacity to meet the court mandates in order to serve these folks appropriately, where we're already struggling to provide some of those services to those that we deal with on a regular basis?
Really good questions, Mr. Supervisor. So why don't we go to the Deputy Secretary first? Why don't we talk about clinical review? You want to do that?
So the process is such that the court orders county behavioral health to do a behavioral health investigation. That investigation is then pulled together. It's not a full clinical eval. That goes to the court. The court then, if there's enough evidence that shows that the individual is likely to meet the criteria, then it would kick off the process, if the person doesn't accept voluntary treatment, to have a full clinical evaluation. You ask a good question about conflict of interest. I'm not in a place where I can answer that. I hadn't thought about a county so small that you only have one clinician, and if that clinician is the clinician who is doing the submission. So I will take that back. I told the senator I might not be able to answer every single question today. In terms of, I think the other one was sustainability. You know, I understand that there are funding challenges. I do also think that we have put a lot of resources into the system. I think part of what we are trying to do with some of the other initiatives is make sure that our Medi-Cal dollar is a dollar that we can highly maximize and utilize. We do think that it is underutilized, that there are things that we are paying for in certain funding sources, including the current MHSA, that are eligible for Medi-Cal services. We continue to add new benefits to our Medi-Cal program on a regular basis. We have a submission right now to CMS to add supportive employment, first break, early psychosis, other different, even 6 months of rent. And so we are working really hard to maximize our Medi-Cal dollar, which means we maximize our federal reimbursement so that you all have more resources and frankly focus, to be honest, focus those resources, at least in county publicly funded behavioral health for people who have severe behavioral health conditions.
And then if it's all right, please dive in on this, and then quickly, and then I want to go to the supervisor's last question, but please.
I just want to quickly also note that behavioral health bridge housing is still available. The governor's budget maintains the original $1.5 billion commitment, so that has not decreased at all. It's just been, some of the funding has been shifted, but it's not been decreased, and your funding that you've already been awarded has not changed at all.
Thank you so much. Let's go to the last question to the supervisor, and then we have time for one more question on this panel, and we're going to go to local leaders. Can you talk about capacity? So let's just say it's a small court and or behavioral health, and they don't have the capacity to be able to meet what all the demands may be for care court. What happens then? Supervisor, I want to make sure that I'm not putting words in your mouth.
So I will take the behavioral health part, and you can maybe take the court part. A housing plan is required. There is not a requirement to provide housing. It's a little nuanced in the law. I think we feel really confident in the course of the next 3 years that we're going to build that capacity. And again, like I said, this is one of the reasons why the criteria for care is so narrow. It is focused on people with untreated schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders, because we truly feel that they should, frankly, be prioritized for care because they are the most vulnerable to be incarcerated, to become unhoused, or to be institutionalized in incredibly high-cost long-term care if we don't intervene earlier. So, there's this much money. Part of what we're saying is that we're asking you to, with this much money, really focus on, for some of you, I mean, Glenn might speak to this, but, estimates of maybe 10, 12 care participants in any given year. But these are the people who need the most help, who frankly cost the most to your county, whether it be repeat hospitalization or time in jail in many cases. And so it is a reallocation of how we spend our money, but I think we feel really confident in the end. And I think it'll be, we're exploring how to have it as part of our independent evaluation, whether or not there is an overall net benefit to a county who invests appropriately in care.
Anybody else on this, please, Madam Director?
Just an upstream suggestion is identifying these issues as early on by partnering up with county entities or partnering in care helps to identify problems that you can bring to us.
That's great. And what I'll also say, and I cannot ever speak for the department or for the judicial branch, there is that proposition that's going to be on the ballot here in March, right? That is looking at significantly expanding capacity. That Prop 1, $6.4 billion, 11,000 acute behavioral health beds, 26,000 outpatient treatment slots, and then funding for another 2,500 approximate units for veterans. So the supervisor is absolutely right, though. Real challenge is that the housing and recognizing that. That's why you're going to see this moving forward here in March. Coming up to California voters. All right, we have time for one more. Let's go to the supervisor right here. Mr. Supervisor, we're going to go to Supervisor Short from Del Norte.
Thank you, Senator. Darren Short, Supervisor, Del Norte County. Just kind of going off of Bruno's question, we're currently at 0 for behavioral health professionals. We're budgeted for 5. We have 5 slots, but we're at 0. We're currently contracted with 1. Is there any resources for a county that does not have the capacity to do those assessments?
So I understand we are in a workforce crisis. Workforce, as you may know, we invested an initial $800 million in our Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, another $1.4 billion 2 years ago, and then as part of our current waiver that I mentioned, we will have a very significant workforce and actually an ongoing funding source for workforce investments. I'm very sympathetic. I think it's important to strategize offline. We've thought about, like, could there be some telehealth? Like, what could we do for very, very small counties who don't have clinicians, especially to do the clinical evaluations? We have a model that works for our state hospital system now that might be something that we should discuss, or as that being a possibility. I can share with you that one of the things that counties did with their startup funds is use it to do really intense recruitment strategies. That was one of the things that Cohort 1 counties spent their one-time dollars on.
And may I just say that that waiver that Stephanie alluded to is there's a $2.4 billion investment that we're working to make, and it's $480 million per year over 5 years. So looking to really invest in that. We recognize that this is not just a crisis here, but it's a statewide crisis.
I think one of the items that we're going to take back, though, and it's not just Del Norte, right? It's a lot of, Trinity as well. Humboldt is barely treading water, right? Mendocino is challenged with this. Lake is challenged with this. I think one of the items that we'll need to be able to bring back is this, and we'll come back to you at that second meeting as well. And I think the other challenge that we have is those slots are there. Folks aren't willing, candidly, to be able to move in to a more isolated community, and I think that's the biggest challenge that we have. I think Sonoma County struggles in being so close to the Bay Area. It's really difficult for a county like Trinity, right? So, and or Del Norte. We will bring this up, promise you. I'll bring this back, and thank you for that. All right, here's what we'd like to be able to do. I'm going to say 5 minutes. I think it'll probably turn into 10. We have a ton of sugar and caffeine. We are offended if you're not eating cookies today. And if you eat a cookie on Friday, it doesn't count. So we encourage you to please hit up the sugar and the snacks in the back. We have plenty of caffeine for you, and the restroom facilities straight out to the right. We're going to come back. It is 2:19 now. We're going to see how many folks can get back by 2:29. Hot dang. All right, thank you. We're going to be bringing up our local panel of experts here in less than 10 minutes. Know that you're going to want to be able to hear this. Thank you all. All right, everybody. We're going to come back together in 2 minutes. We encourage you to grab a cookie, get some chips, hit it hard, and we're going to get going here in just 2 minutes. 2 minutes. We're going to get going. All right, everybody, we're going to start coming back together. If folks can take seats. All right. So, want to do a quick reset and just a few items about where we go from here. This is our first meeting. We are going to be getting together as a group again, if you'd be willing, for a second meeting with, of course, our statewide leaders and our local leaders to be able to assist with implementation. I want to be super candid, and I think can speak for a lot of folks. Supervisor Short spoke for, I think, a lot in the room, where literally you have positions, you can't get folks into them. There are individuals in the county that are doing multiple jobs, and you do everything you can to be able to hang on to them. And also understand how challenging it can be of looking at yet another program coming down the pipeline. So today, I don't want folks to think this is going to be the end all. We are literally taking your feedback, as we always do, and to be able to refine, we're going to grind down and come back to you. That's why we want your blunt, open, and honest feedback today, which I know is not going to be a problem from this group, and then be able to come back not with a one-size-fits-all approach, but with a program that's going to work for each and every one of you. And I don't want to speak for the Deputy Secretary, but I'm going to attempt to, and she can throw her chair at my head in a moment. There are going to be financial resources available. And I want to be very clear, especially in more rural counties, we're not talking hundreds of folks that would be in this program. Madam Deputy Secretary, again, feel free to throw your chair if you think I'm incorrect. We're talking maybe a dozen in really rural areas of this state, or less. And the last thing I'll just say is this: it is going to be those high utilizers who your sheriff's office, your police department, your courts are already interacting with. And then being able to get those individuals off the streets with a plan and given the care they need, and at times, based off of their care plan and a judge, it may not be exactly the way that individual would see it, but what is going to be best for them long term. So that's a long way of saying we really want your open and honest feedback today. We're going to come back to you and work with you every step of the way. And to the Madam CEO of Mendocino County, I promise you, everyone who's speaking, we're taking detailed notes. I'm taking notes. Summer is taking notes today. Rhiannon is taking notes today to be able to come back to you and make sure that we have it. And then we're also going to be getting resources out to each and every one of you, if it's all right with you, whether it's paper resources, video resources, resources that are online. You will be having that follow-up. Is that all right with everybody today? All right. So ladies and gentlemen, I know we're running a little behind, but we really wanted to be able to have that conversation. You want details? Hot damn, we got them coming up right now. So each one of these individuals that you're going to hear from have been deeply involved in the first round, our cohort number 1, in regards to care court rule out. So first and foremost, I think you all know Sarah. She loves Mendocino County. She called Mendocino County home. She worked in the county of Mendocino. We're still upset that she's with RCRC now. But our loss is RCR's gain. She's going to be giving you a big picture briefing on what's worked on initial implementation, and most importantly, where there are some challenges and what you should avoid. She's also brought an amazing attorney with her to be able to have a further conversation with you if we need to on that. 2, we have Mr. CAO, Mr. DeMoss here. He is the county administrator for Glenn County. He has been living the dream on being a first cohort county, but he's going to be giving you the who, what, where, and when on how it's worked, and candidly, what the hell to avoid. And we are truly grateful that Dr. Kelly is here as well. She is coming to us from Orange County. Even though she may be a Dodgers fan, don't hold that against her. Or maybe you can. Yeah, exactly. There we go. All of a sudden, yeah, people are going to start cussing. Thank you, Madam CEO. Watch out. Hot damn. Are you a Dodgers fan? I'm sorry? Are you a Dodgers fan?
I'm an Angels fan.
Oh, hell. That's like second tier. All right. Hey, there we go. All right. So, Dr. Kelly is the Mental Health and Recovery Services Director and Chief of Mental Health and Recovery Services for Orange County. She is amazing to be able to hear from in her experiences, and she's going to be able to give you the who, what, where, and when. And I promise you, you're going to hear from these three. They're going to be blunt in talking about the experience. So let's get right into it. Let's hear from Sarah first from RCRC, and take it away. You have 5 minutes.
I'll just start with, just in case you aren't aware of who Cohort 1 is, it's San Diego, Orange County, Riverside, San Francisco, Stanislaus, Tuolumne, Glenn, and LA coming in December. So these are great people to know as we move into this. I want to start off by saying Care Court will work best in counties where there's a high level of trust, which is why these early conversations are absolutely necessary. A lot of these interagency collaborations started right away, putting together that core team, developing those workflows, and I think the tabletop sessions have been really helpful for those that are getting ready. Also, CARE Act is essentially layering a new process on existing services, so essentially another door into county services. So it may be preferable to proactively divert potential care respondents into existing service pathways. And in Care Court, it does encourage you for voluntary pathway. So you could be a full-fledged care case, get a care plan, or in the early stages, engage and get them into voluntary services. There will probably be those that are willing to cooperate, but also those who are not willing to cooperate, or you may have a hard time finding. So you'll have to be aware of those other types of pathways that are going to make sense for them. You're also probably going to see referrals from the criminal court side, and they may not be aware with those the tight diagnostic criteria. So you really need to have those communications now, also with the DAs, with probation, and your public guardians if this is a potential step down for LPS. So start that now. We've also seen in the early stages that there really is a disconnect between who is actually eligible, and there is a long list of eligible petitioners. And if you start now with that education, you're going to have less petitions on the front end. And I think that's been a success in a lot of the counties because all of them are doing a lot of community work about care court, and who this is really for. You're probably wondering, how the heck am I going to do this? How am I going to find the money to do this? And what does this look like? So as mentioned, there are some funding opportunities, and the CARE Act specifically says that there has to be an allocation for those process-driven costs. But those process-driven costs are really focused on your behavioral health. Those court hearings, the investigations, and to some extent your public defenders if they ultimately are the legal representation. But there will be gaps, and it does not fund everything. And the one thing you need to be aware of is the workload for your county council. This is a court process, so 2 attorneys and a judge. So county council is going to be in the room working with your behavioral health department and in court. And all of these are really legal documents, so they're going to be reviewing it. So you're going to start to strategize on how to fill those gaps and how you're going to make that work with how your structure is with county council, and get them engaged fast and quick if you aren't already talking to them. Again, this is not new services, it's connecting people to existing services. CARE Act does call out a number of essentially county services that could be eligible for a care plan, really focused on realignment funded programs, MHSA funded programs, Medi-Cal. It also names a number of different types of housing program like No Place Like Home and bridge housing. So really take a deep dive, and it's going to look different from county to county because we're not all identical. And then from there, have those conversations with the courts because they need to be able to know what's on the table. There also are provisions in the CARE Act that says all care plan services and supports ordered by the court are subject to available funding and program eligibility requirements. So having that realistic conversation about where you're at is going to be important to prevent some tension that could happen. Now there is a sanction process. Let's hope no one gets there and this is all a collaborative, but that is still on the table. If that does happen, there will be dollars from the sanctions. They will return to the county of origin to be reinvested in behavioral health. But so far, it's been very collaborative with the courts, but that is something that's there. You should also be aware that you could see new clients that aren't normally eligible for county services entering the system, probably through petitions from friends and family. So be prepared to do private insurance billing. That's going to be challenging and hard, but you're going to need to look at that if you're going to want to recoup those costs. Next, like they've said, the previous panel said, there is an ability for legal service nonprofits to represent care participants. It's probably unlikely in a lot of your counties. Your PDs are going to be on the front line. They'll likely be the legal representation. If you're lucky enough to have legal aid, they probably are limited on how many people they can take, so expect overflow. And there was a question about, am I going to be involved in this process? How much as the PD? A lot. This is a high-touch legal process, from a lot of different hearings to the care plan negotiations. And if you enter into this full process, it's a minimum of 1 year, but you can re-up for 2. So that's going to be a considerable workload that you're going to be involved in. So maybe take a look at the statute and really start to plan for those things.
We have about 1 minute.
Quickly, it's probably going to be hard to estimate those how many cases you're going to have. It's a bit of a question mark, but what we've seen from cohort 1 is there are not as many that they initially thought, probably because of the diagnostic criteria, and also there's a high bar for petitions. It's a lot of work to put that petition together. We've also seen a lot of petitions coming in that just don't meet the criteria, or they can't find the participant, or they don't want to participate. We've also seen judges be a little bit more lenient, not dismissing cases outright if the petitions aren't complete, but trying to work with people on the front end. So in this first year or 2 of implementation, expect more time on the front end of the process, which involves an evaluation piece by the behavioral health department. And I would also say work on your methodology now to track your costs for care court, especially with your county council and your public guardian. That's going to be really important to inform the state on their budget process, but also good data. Good data is going to impact those reports, where we take care court, and what that long-term supports actually look like. And finally, utilize cohort 1. They have a lot of great stuff that you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Thank you so much. Very grateful to Ms. Duquette. She's been fantastic and will be with us every step of the way as we look at implementing here in the North State, North Coast. We want to say thank you so much to Mr. CEO, Mr. DeMoss, the CEO of Glenn County. He has been driving for the last 48 hours to be able to get here. We're really grateful. Truly was up in Chico yesterday and back down here today. We're really grateful that you're here, Mr. CEO. Take it away, perspective from the County Administrative Officer.
Absolutely. So just to give a little perspective to you in the room, Glenn County is about 28,000, almost 29,000 individuals. We are basically 1% of the population of Orange County. So as a frame of reference for anything I say, you get a sense. We were estimated, as we were talking with DHCS about what to expect, our population, they were estimating 10 to 12. As of today, we're still at 0. And my understanding is our first petition is in work, and it's actually coming from our behavioral health department. So what we did in Glenn County was we tried to look at our successful implementation of the behavioral health treatment court. We brought that partnership and those members back together. We looked at the fact that we had a huge barrier for housing resources. Glenn County has absolutely no residential services whatsoever. 100% of our placements are out of county. We don't have a psych health facility. We don't have any board and cares. We don't have any emergency shelters or adult residential treatment facilities. We were fortunate in the midst of all this, and we did score Project Homekey, which is setting up 32 units in our largest city, which is Orland. That's about 8,000 people. Our first step in getting ready, our behavioral health director pulled together a planning team. That planning team was made up of me, our county council, the Superior Court presiding judge, and since we have 2, the assistant presiding judge, as well as the court executive officer and their operations manager. Our Health and Human Services Agency, the director came on board, the assistant director came on board, and our behavioral health director, plus our adult program manager and our senior program coordinator. Our public defender, Jeff Dulabon, was part of our planning team, as well as our public guardian and our adult protective services supervisor. As part of our success in the treatment court, we used a company, Idea Consulting, Nancy Callahan. Some of you may know of her and her programs. We brought her in. We used some of our planning money to contract with her. And then lastly, we brought in Jose Lara, and he's with our SHARP, or our self-help. And so this has been the team that's been around the table in Glenn County since October. As we were getting started, we realized that we needed to meet often. However, when we were getting started, we also didn't have all of the court documents yet. They were still being vetted and put into place. But it did give us a time to sit, and we met bi-weekly, in order to look at the law, in order to look at the things in the law that we thought might be preventative for us to implement. And we did work with RCRC as SB 35 was being put together. And we also took the opportunity, since we didn't have all the documents to know exactly how everything was going to flow, to look at the budgetary impacts of what we thought 10 to 12 individuals might be on an annual basis. We developed flow charts so that we could conceptualize visually about how the process might work. And we took to educating, even though we knew we didn't have all the answers and we probably had more questions than answers, we took to educating our public. We met with our stakeholders, we met with our local electeds, we went to city council meetings, and we went with a caveat that this was going to be a new program. Obviously, there was an idea behind that program, there was an ideal we were going to try to achieve, and that we would circle back with all of them once we knew a little bit more about the process, qualifications, and most of our city councils were very helpful. They had great questions, and they were supportive, which I think was a big deal. So we've talked a little bit about who qualifies, so I'll skip that part, and move on to issues. So one of the issues that we did run into, which has already come up today, was about the difference between the public defender's office and other representation. As was pointed out, the state bar did their RFP. There were no respondents for Glenn County, and that was very helpful because from day one we'd had the public defender at the table, and the efforts that we had made, the plans, the contractual language that we were putting together, we didn't have to change anything, and that worked out well for us. Another piece that we had to figure out was the secure
About 1 minute. 1 minute.
Thank you. The secure transfer of documents. And so we worked together with our court, our two IT groups, all probably 2 people in the room, worked together to come up with a safe way for our county court and our county behavioral health department, our county council, to share the documents they needed to share because we don't have electronic filing in Glenn County. So some of the things we did right, looking at our budget, considering who the stakeholders were that needed to be around the table. Obviously, at that time, we didn't know about billing, and so we've gone back and looked at that since then. One of the things that you've all talked about today is staffing, and so I told my team, I'm like, look, we're just going to have to rob Peter's counselor and give him to Paul. We just don't have extra people that are willing to come to work to take on these new programs. So we kind of had to shift the chairs around the table in our behavioral health department. It doesn't mean that we have more capacity. It just means we're using the capacity we have in a different way. And hopefully through educational processes, there'll be more individuals out there in the workforce, and we can include them in our workforce. Lastly, we've been really successful because of the partnership that we grew around that planning table. I cannot express anymore how important it was to get all those folks early on, no one being the key stakeholder, but everybody being there to share in the effort and in the lift. And one of the most important pieces out of that was just the trust that was built between behavioral health and our court. I think it was instrumental. I think it's probably one of the most important pieces. And so I would encourage you, I know we're talking about December, but I would say get around the table now and get all the stakeholders around the table. Thank you.
I'm going to do a quick 60-second lightning round with you, Mr. CAO.
Sure.
What was your worst fear and prior to implementation to what it is now? Did that come true?
So the biggest concern was the lack of housing and the lack of housing resources. Just by luck, getting the Project Home Key really turned the corner for us on that. But that's not the only thing that we're making an investment in. We're using some of the dollars that we got for planning, and we're looking to purchase probably a home, and then we're going to be looking to bring in our first board and care contract.
And from where you started to where you're at now, how do you feel about the program?
I think that no plan of action ever survives the first conflict with the enemy. So I think that all of our planning is really great. I think that I'm absolutely positive that something will change between now and the end of the first care plan we get. But the fact that everybody was at the table together and building those relationships and that trust, I think it will go fine.
In your head, did you think that you were going to be overwhelmed with petitioners coming through versus now just seeing your first? What was in your head? What was in your team's head?
Our behavioral health director is a really good, level-headed gentleman, and he took a look at our historical individuals that might qualify, and he really felt like 6 to 10 was kind of his number. So the 10 to 12 that we got from the state, he was more than comfortable with.
Got it. And you've heard the concerns, very similar to yours. Have those played out?
As of yet, no. The things that we were planning and creating contingencies for, we haven't had to enact any of those contingencies, so no.
Got it. More questions, I'm sure, Mr. CAO, coming your way. Thank you so much. Really nice job to both Mr. CAO and Ms. Duquette. We're really grateful, Doctor, that you're with us. You traveled long and far to be here. We're really grateful. I know that you are a true believer of making this work and why you're spending so much time. So we're really grateful. Doctor, take it away to be able to give the perspective from behavioral health.
Thank you. So Orange County opted in as the first cohort because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and it was really important that we try and make this work. So this really is a tool. This is not salvation for anybody. It is a tool to add to the toolbox. This is not about homelessness at the end of the day. I think that's one of the biggest things, is that everyone still believes that because that's how it was initially crafted, including even some of my electeds. And when we go through it and I walk them through, they are shocked that it's not about unhoused people. So I think saying that over and over and over again is really important. This is about untreated schizophrenia spectrum disorder. That's what it's about. So Orange County, with 2.3 million people, about 1 million of those are Medi-Cal beneficiaries. We serve in behavioral health 44,000 unduplicated clients a year. Of those, 18,000 have schizophrenia. So we are serving a big population. So we were pretty sure we weren't going to get a flood of folks. And for the first couple of weeks, we got no one. We went out and we did a lot of education to community. We went to all of our NAMI groups. We did groups in Mandarin. We did them in Vietnamese. We did them in Spanish. We spoke very differently because the folks who came to us were mostly parents of adult children who they've kept on their own insurance and had no idea about what the public system offered. And unfortunately, at the end of those events, some of those folks were going to remove their children from the private insurance so they could get them into our system and get needed help. So any outreach effort, I think, is an opportunity to educate everyone about what mental illness is, what it is not, to decrease stigma, and certainly to offer resources. Again, the biggest thing is for you all to manage expectations for yourselves, for your staff, for the community. A big lesson we learned is that 14 days from the time we get the petition, so we've received from the court 46 petitions, 46 have gone to the court. Of those, 26 have met prima facie and have come to me, 26. I have 14 days to find, befriend, develop a relationship, get someone to trust me, come with me, serve them court papers as part of the trusting relationship we've developed, and then come into court. And within that 14 days, I can offer them voluntary services, which is our whole point. We all know we're more likely to do something if we really want to do it, and we can really get people to that point. But when I was the behavioral health director in San Bernardino County, we did a pilot project like this, and it took us, when a person was housed, 20 face-to-face visits to get them to agree to go into treatment voluntarily. But when they did, 90% of them did it and remained in program. If they were unhoused, it was 40. I can't do 20 visits in 14 days. So most of ours, 23 of those 26 are continued. And that's because we have an amazing judge, Ibrahim Beitai, who will work with us. If you don't have a good relationship between your public defender or your legal aid folks, the court or your behavioral health director, you are not going to do well here. And our clients, our communities are not going to do well. You have got to get together. As Scott was saying, from the very beginning, start talking now and learn each other's languages, because we all speak really differently and we like to be in each other's lanes, and that's not helpful. So we meet regularly, our whole team. Every Monday we meet, we go over the numbers. We do it virtually because the court's really impacted. We have one judge, and he also does our AOT court. He has one court date. It's on Tuesdays. We meet on Mondays, and then we also attend court so we know what's happening. But that relationship is going to be key. One of the reasons that it's difficult, we've had a few dismissals, but another part of the extension of that 14-day engagement period is folks are hard to find. 15 of those 26 that we have are unhoused, but some of them live in their cars. So this is what we know. We get a petition for a Caucasian woman named Sylvia who has a black car. I got 14 days to find Sylvia. That's not helpful. So the judge knows that, and the judge actually, I think he's a social worker in a robe. He really cares about this, which is a good thing and also a bad thing. But he really will allow people to bring in other information for their petition, but really important. And then another thing is we are dealing with a very difficult disease, not the people, it's the disease. This is not a disease anyone in this room would want ever to have. And anosognosia, or not knowing you're sick, is a major part of the folks we're treating. So how do you get someone who doesn't want to listen to you? I mean, if you have teenagers, you have some idea. But this really is an art, so we're using LEAP, which is an evidence-based practice: listen, empathize, act, and partner. It is a training on how you speak to someone who does not want to speak to you. And it's really effective, and we've paid for that training for our court, for our self-help folks, for the public defender, and our own staff. And we're using those additional monies that we got. And I see the senator looking over here at me, so how much more time? Am I good? Okay. What else? Also, the ability to move the courtroom. If I was told I have some great stuff, if Counsel Arthur said to me, hey, Ronnie, I've got something that's really great and it will help you, come to my court. I'm not going for that. No one trusts the court, no offense, but really our clients in particular do not trust that. So our judge takes his robe off and comes across the street where we have a full-service partnership that provides a lot of services. We use that building, and he'll hold court there. If you aren't able to leave your courtroom, it's going to be very difficult. So that ability is very, very helpful. We are funding a full-service partnership for this program for what we call treatment refractory schizophrenia, so hard to treat mental illness. We are training everyone on treatment refractory schizophrenia, ways that you can address it, as well as how to work with complex medical issues and complex co-occurring disorders. Another reminder that medicine is not for everybody, and it's not a cure. We don't cure our diseases, we treat them. We hope someone will get to relapse, but that doesn't happen as much. The disease might still be there, especially this one. So we really want to give all the tools we have to that program. That program is costing us $5.2 million a year. I have 11 staff in it, and I'm going to have to fund it through, I'm funding it through MHSA, Prop 1, and I have to do that as we go if the proposition passes, but something else is going to go because I have to keep that. So I will stop.
Doctor, thank you so much. We're going to go to your questions right after this. Doctor, we're going to do a similar lightning round. Okay. What was in your head when you started the process, bringing everybody together, to what reality is?
So I knew we all had a collaborative court. We worked together really well. I was hopeful that that was going to be the thing, and getting presiding judge on board was very helpful because everything was smooth after that, as it was with our public defender. So I knew that it was going to be important that we have the relationship, and we don't usually even go present without one another. So don't tell them I'm here, but we usually all just kind of go together so that we appear as a united front, which really we have to be.
What wouldn't you repeat?
Well, I think you all shouldn't repeat any of the things we got through, but even just the idea of doing community stuff, you have to get out there and talk to the community. I think we didn't really have such difficulties, except sometimes our public defender, especially newer public defenders who came on, really wanted to do what they were so horrified by the inhumanities that we deal with in behavioral health every day, that they couldn't see that they were being manipulated sometimes. So we did have the jailhouse telegraph system has told everyone this is a way you can get out. So we have folks who are waiting, who have a murder beef, who are trying to, their public defender is trying to petition for them. Obviously, if they met criteria, they could be incompetent to stand trial, something else, but we're not going to wait 20 years after their court date to enroll them in care. So
where do you see the most petitions coming from?
For us, we have, of those 26, 16 came from family members, mostly parents. We have 5 came from hospitals. And it's difficult for hospitals. The Hospital Association was clear with us. If we have to go to court, we're not going. So they're not writing them because you have to send a representative to court. County Behavioral Health has done a few. Our guardian at Lytton has done 1.
Got it. Doctor, thank you. Ms. Duquette, focus on Tuolumne real quick. You've been involved. What would you say, what was with Tuolumne, what were they thinking versus what reality is?
I think similar to Glenn, and you can also chime in, you talk with Tracy a lot, they planning for a number, not as many coming forward, a lot of early interest. Seems that there need to be a little education on petitions, help with people petitions, so low number. And I know for them, building the relationships with the courts was really important. And it wasn't super easy at first to get everyone together to start planning, but there was some work on building that relationship, which took a while. And I'll also mention for Stanislaus, they too had that housing question, and they spent a lot of their time and effort in the early days really identifying housing. What kind of projects do we need? Because that was going to be their biggest hurdle with people coming in. We just don't have somewhere to place them.
That's great. Thank you. We're going to open it up to each and every one of you. Fantastic job to the panel. Let's see. Questions, comments, concerns that you'd like to be able to address here from these local county leaders. What they've seen, what they wouldn't repeat. We have some presiding judges here. We have county administrative offices. We have leaders of Health and Human Services in the counties. what would you like to be able to know from our local leaders? Please, Madam CAO.
Thank you, and thank you again for this forum. I really appreciate it. The question is, and Scott and the county administrators have learned a little bit about it through our biweekly meetings, but I think it would be helpful, Scott or anyone else in the panel, to share with us what kind of training or what kind of training have you completed with first responders?
So as I mentioned, we did reach out to each one of the various stakeholders. So we met with Hospital Association, we met with, Sheriff's Office. Sheriff is also the police for the city of Willows. And then we met with the fire volunteers, which we have, I think it's 25 different volunteer fire stations. So my behavioral health director, great guy, was very busy reaching out, letting people know, helping them to understand what we saw the petition process as being, and then pointing them back to the department if there were questions. So did we do any specific training about how to complete a petition? No, we didn't get to there, but we did tell them where they saw individuals that might meet that criteria list to reach back out to us and let us take the lead in that process.
That's great. Thank you, Madam CAO. Also want to throw out there any items that you would like us to follow up on for our second meeting. Now would be the time to be able to bring that forward. Please, sir. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Justin Swift, Deputy Sheriff with Marin County. For the doctor, if you guys do court off-site, how do you deal with courtroom security when you're not in a courtroom?
It's actually right across the street from the courtroom. These folks, the judge feels comfortable going and goes with the public defender. They're not in a room by themselves. They're in a bigger space because they're not going to want to stick them in a small room, and that's been really successful. So there haven't been any issues there. Again, it's not a crime death schizophrenia. So I think it's the way the judge comes at it, and for those of you who know Judge Beitai, he's like a really nice, easygoing guy, so I think that also helps. But I think it reduces the paranoia and the anxiety of the individual enough. This is all voluntary. I want to say that again too. This is voluntary. There's no big stick here. This is voluntary. So what we're trying to do when we get them to come to that space, they actually all know the space. They meaning lots of people in our community. So it's a fairly safe area. It's right across the street.
Thank you. Good question. Please. Good afternoon. And thank you all for your patience for hanging with us. I know we're going a little overtime. Thank you.
Hi, Cheyenne Hogan, Del Norte County. I'm Deputy Director for Behavioral Health. And my question is for Veronica. I'm just curious, in behavioral health, our targeted population is the Medi-Cal population. And especially with our workforce shortage, we have just kind of eliminated serving anybody else. If you don't have Medi-Cal, we can't see you. Of the referrals that you have, do you have some that are private insurance, since you did mention that?
We have 2. They have private insurance. We have a number we don't know yet, that we had 16 who are Medi-Medi, or Medi-Cal or Medicare. We also, our judge is so hot to try to get some insurance company to say no, they won't pay. He's going to call them into court. So we're hopeful for that as well, because I think that then sets a tone. What we've seen is if private insurance companies don't do their job when a 17-year-old is going to a pediatrician who's obviously having a psychotic break, if they don't treat them, which they don't do very well, they end up in our system. They must be responsible for that.
Yeah, and I would say that's a big concern because, what we see is that people who do have private insurance, it's very costly for them to come into our office. And when we have court mandates saying, come in, but we're costing people thousands of dollars to be seen, there's just a parity issue in that. So just bringing that to light.
And the ledge does say they have to pay. So that's why we're waiting for some test case.
Thank you for advancing that. Good question. Please, Supervisor.
Hello, Darren Short again. Mr. DeMoss, it struck me that you said you kind of got a steal from Peter to put your work in to pay Paul here a little bit ago. I'm wondering how much time this is going to take out of your county counsel's office, or what that kind of looked like. And if you are stealing from one project to put him to work on, him or her on this other product, does it kind of turn into a de facto kind of unfunded mandate? I mean, are we seeing processes suffering at the county level due to your absence of your county council having to work on these projects?
Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously, at this point, we don't know the full impact of what it's going to look like when county council does have to deal with the petition, get to court, all those pieces, because we haven't had a case yet. But our measuring stick, if you will, is basically our county council's interaction with conservatorships, or even with child welfare, which is very hands-on. We do know that at some point in the future, this may end in having to try to figure out how to beef up our county council's office. But at the outset, because we're talking about, less than 5 cases probably, we feel that there's sufficient capacity to deal with it. The big problem with county council's office, though, is that there isn't any funding allocated through care court for county council. So it's going to end up hitting your A87. So that is something that we pushed really hard. RCRC advocated, CSAC advocated. To me, it's the biggest hole in the program at this point, is the fact that our departments are going to have some issues with A87 in the future because of the amount of time it will take with county council. Yep.
Good question. Thank you for bringing that up. Comments, questions, concerns that folks would like to be able to advance at this time? All right. Can we talk about some potential follow-ups? Would that be all right with everybody? So look, again, I want to stress this. Know that everyone's plate is spilling over. And at this point in time in the history of where we live here in the state and nation, people can be a bit grumpy. And so the reason why I say that is, a lot of needs on your plate right now. And know that this is a major commitment. Reason why we wanted to be able to come together today is to be able to hear from you, your concerns, your comments, and how we can make this as successful as possible while also providing the resources that you may need to be able to implement successfully. So here's what we'd like to be able to do over the next few weeks. You're going to receive an email from Nora Mounts in our office asking you for questions, comments, and concerns coming out of this meeting. We would like you to be able to be blunt and succinct. We will then work with state agencies to be able to get those questions, comments, and concerns answered, and we'd like to be able to come back together. I have been keeping track of each of your questions here today, writing down your first and last name, and we'll be answering those and following up with each and every one of you as well. The last thing we'll just say is, I think the number one piece of advice, and I'm going to look to this panel for closing comments, is starting those discussions now, right? Bringing together courts, public defender, DAs, county council, your Health and Human Services Department, all to be able to start having these conversations to make sure that we have a smooth glide path coming into December. The last thing we'd like to mention is the issue of housing. There are several counties between the Golden Gate Bridge and the Oregon border that are not going to be able to meet those potential housing needs. We'd like to start having a discussion between the 7 counties if there needs to be some type of regional approach to that, where, for example, one county would potentially contract with another county, whether it's on evaluations or it could be on placement. Because again, I'm looking to the CAO in Trinity, there's just no way with all what is on Trinity's docket right now that they're going to be able to look at bringing on a full-time individual to be able to do assessments. So would like to be able to start thinking about that, and then also what that may cost to be able to prop up. Would all of you be willing to be able to come back together here in the next 90 to 120 days, somewhere right in there, to be able to have a follow-up conversation? Would that be all right with everybody? and I know that many of you want to put a pin in your eye, but it's just, I want to make sure that we have a successful rollout. The last time we did this, by the way, is when the state started advancing homeless housing funding. Back in 2015, not one dime went north of Sonoma County. Not one dime. Fast forward to today, it's been over $100 million. So the more we can work together now, the better off I think we'll all be, and candidly to be able to help solve the crisis that exists in each of our communities. And we want to be a partner with you, active, engage, and deliver. So if you'd be willing, you're going to receive an email from Nora. Respond if you can. Questions, comments, concerns. We'll then work with state agencies and this amazing panel to be able to help make this launch as successful as possible. And let's start thinking about what type of regional approaches that we could take and how we could work with you to fund that. If you'd be willing to do that, we would love to be able to work with you on that. I'm going to go to closing comments from each of you. We're going to start from the doctor, work our way to Mr. Kett. Closing words, 60 seconds, if you don't mind, on just what the most important part of implementation will be between now and the go-live date.
Yeah, I think first we have to stop blaming each other. Blaming behavioral health for mental illness is like blaming oncologists for cancer. We have to listen first. All of us listen, because sometimes I don't want to hear my public defender, even my own county council, tell me anything. So shut your mouth and open your ears. Meet often and be flexible.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It's been great to have you here. Mr. CAO.
Yeah, for me, I would say that communication is of the utmost, and beginning that communication sooner rather than later. And then lastly, you're not having to strike a path through the jungle with no machete. All of the Phase 1 counties shared our documents through the County Administrative Officers Association. So there's a lot of great material there. And being a small county, I won't tell you that that our county did everything without looking to Orange and to Riverside and to San Diego. We really did fly on their coattails, and that was very helpful for us. We didn't end up on the same path they did, but that's how we got where we were going. So,
thank you so much, Ms. CEO. Mr. Kent.
December will be here before you know it. So if you haven't started having those conversations and putting together your teams, go ahead and do that. But also, CareCourt's not going to be perfect, right? We never get something right on the first go. So the feedback to your state partners, as well as to RCRC, is going to be really beneficial just long term to try to make this program work. And of course, we're here for resources if you need it, both me and Arthur, and we're happy to help.
Thank you so much. To each and every one of you who took so much time out of your busy schedules, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to many of you who've driven miles upon miles to be able to be here today. We're incredibly grateful. You will be receiving follow-up from us here in the coming few days. We would like to be able to get together in the next 90 to 120 days, and we look forward to a successful launch in December. Thank you again for your work and your partnership. We look forward to working with you here in 2024. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.